And we're back in the room, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Caiman Show. Joining me today, I have a very, very special guest. He is, or was, we'll go is. He is the co-founder of Superstars of Wrestling and Powerslam magazine. He was the editor of Powerslam magazine. Mr. Powerslam himself, now working and affiliated with Inside the Ropes. I give you none other than the one, the only, Mr. Findlay Martin. Welcome aboard. Pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for that glowing introduction. I mean, I'm hoping I can follow it.
Yes.
Build me up there, It's one of those things. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to measure up to expectations after that stupendous introduction.
I'm sure you'll be absolutely on the ball, Mr. M. Absolutely on the ball. How have you been anyway? How's lockdown been for you? We hopefully getting through it now. I've got my second jab in a bit, so.
Oh yeah, today, right?
Yeah. Let's get that done, and it's, first steps back to freedom and all that,
Exactly. How were you after your first one?
Sir, I thought I was okay. I had the AstraZeneca. Make of it what you will. I thought I was okay. A guy I used to play rugby with was in the queue behind me going into the surgery. He texted me the next morning. Oh, did you have a fever last night? I was like, nah, top of the shop, mate. 2 o'clock that afternoon then, I was shaking like the proverbial shitting dog. I was, ugh. So, it was a bit, hot and cold, bit of a headache, but nothing major. Touch wood, that's the worst of it, and I'll be okay later on.
Yeah. I don't know what they say about the second one, whether that's better or worse. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I was lucky. I've had two. I had my second one last week.
Yeah.
Just had a little bit of a sore arm. That was it.
That's cool. The sore arm I can handle,
But, us Northerners, they make us tough up here, don't they?
That's it. Yeah, we're just Southern softies down here in Wales, aren't we? That's what it is. But yeah, as I said, thanks for coming on. It's an absolute pleasure. I've been an avid reader of Powerslam magazine. I was pretty much through its entirety, from its early roots of Superstars of Wrestling. So if you're game, I'd just like to talk a bit about the journey of Powerslam and Superstars of Wrestling. First of all, first thing I guess is, how did it come about? What was your involvement in wrestling at the time it came about, or was there an involvement? Just talk us through it. Tell us the early seeds, if you will.
Okay, well, I was born in 1969, so I grew up with British wrestling on ITV Saturday afternoons. Watched it a lot, as pretty much everyone of my era did, because pre-82 there's only 3 channels. BBC Two basically shuts down most of Saturday or part of Saturday, showing some boring films on Saturday afternoon. So, of course, you watch British wrestling. What else were you going to watch?
That's it, exactly.
No one had any bloody money in the 1970s. It all sat in front of the TV. So watching into the 80s, kind of my interest waned a little bit. I guess probably the first time I saw American wrestling maybe was in Rocky 3, the famous
Thunderlips. Yeah,
Rocky mix. Remember seeing it in Highlander at the start of the first Highlander film. Did you ever see a movie called The California Dolls?
The California Dolls? No, I don't believe so. Brief me on it. Give me the short version.
Well, it was released in America as All the Marbles, and it starred Peter Falk of Columbo fame, and he was the manager of a women's tag team. And it was pretty good movie by the standards of the time. Came out in the 80s. This is obviously pre-Mickey Rourke and the Wrestler. And I remember watching that and being quite, fascinated really by the wrestling scene. And they're kind of portraying it as real in the film, which was, is always a bit of a funny thing in the 80s. So I remember watching that. Was it Body Slam? That was another wrestling movie. That was garbage.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Pile of pants, that was. Yeah.
Yeah, Body Piper. Dirk Benedict, I think, from the A-Team was in it.
That's it.
Tanya Roberts, I think, was in it as well. So it wasn't probably... And then I remember, I think it was like 87, when we went to every month or so, every 6 weeks, we would see WWF wrestling on Saturday afternoons in the British wrestling slot. And I remember seeing some of the matches like Hogan Savage, and I think Bulldogs versus the Hart Foundation was one of the matches they showed. And I mean, just being fascinated by, you know, it was so big and brassy and the budgets were enormous. You had British wrestling there at like, you know, Fairfield Halls in wherever it is, or Walthamstow Assembly Halls, and this little town hall, and then you'd see WWF from Boston Garden or Madison Square Garden or something like that.
The big lights and everything, the big show, like
it just felt colossal. You know, it was like, you know, it was like comparing like, you know, school play to like a West End show. I mean, it was like such a disparity in the budget. I mean, this is not to diminish the talents of many of the British wrestlers. In the ring, they were obviously really good. Some of them were, but it was the whole presentation of the WWF wrestlers, from the costuming to the bodies. Obviously, most of them were on steroids back then, and they just looked superhuman. And then like it was March, April 88, when I officially became a fan. And somebody showed me, I was on the YTS scheme at the time.
Oh, YTS, I remember YTS.
And this crappy computer course. It was just, anyway, we won't go into that.
You can if you want.
Through the lunchtime, somebody, a friend of mine actually called Mark Greaves, brought in a tape of WrestleMania 4.
Wow.
The match that converted me was Demolition versus Strike Force.
Yes, the heel turn, yeah?
No, I can't remember whether anyone turned heel in that match, but I do remember watching it and just thinking, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. And a bunch of us watched it, and we were like trying to pick holes in it, and like, oh, it can't be real. This wrestling's not real. And then moments of it just look so authentic. You're thinking, oh, well, you know, because that was why we were fans and why we are still fans. We want to suspend our disbelief, just like when we go to the flicks.
That's it. When you go to the movies, you know, like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger's not going around blowing everyone up, really, but we want to believe that he is, you know?
Exactly. You know, from the same era, Jason Voorhees isn't really killing all those kids at Crystal Lake.
Exactly.
You want to lose yourself in the terror and the gore or whatever, you know, or you want to lose yourself in this thing, this form of entertainment that you're watching. So that was the moment when I became a fan. So from that point, it was like, I would buy the magazines if I could find them. They were very difficult to find then in the UK, American wrestling magazines. In fact, I lived in Kendal at the time, and I would travel, I kid you not, 40 miles. There was a comic store in Preston. I'd go on the train.
Oh my God.
And there was a comic store that sold American wrestling magazines. And I would travel that far to buy the American wrestling magazines.
That's some dedication to the cause, man.
Yeah, that was it. And I remember there was a shop in Manchester. I wouldn't actually travel all the way to Manchester, you know, from Kendal, which would have been 70 miles, to buy a wrestling magazine. But if I was in Manchester, I knew people who lived there then and would go there quite often. And there was a shop there that would sell like all the American magazines. I was buying them all up. So it was like this, you know, unquenchable thirst for knowledge of American wrestling. And I was a huge fan. Then I started working for a guy who did magazines, got into the magazine business actually also in 1988 in production. And it was really easy back then to get a magazine in shops. It would become far more, you know, difficult in the 2000s, far more expensive. And he was one for a fad. He made his money from BMXs.
Oh, yeah.
In the early 80s, he'd done very well out of that. And then that craze had kind of faded. Then he did a magazine on New Kids on the Block. Remember them?
I do remember them. Yeah, I wasn't a fan. Let me just put that out there, okay? But I do remember them.
Well done. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I thought you better put that out.
Yeah, no, without name dropping. I was talking to Sarah Green about them the other week. Just saying, but it was just a conversation. Wasn't a fan.
Would she have been on Going Live?
Correct. Yeah. She's on Going Live. She did Ghost Watch and everything in '92, which had us all bricking it on Halloween. But Going Live was a main bag. What she's known for. Yeah, nice lady.
Well, I mean, I remember New Kids on the Block were like the One Direction of the day, weren't they?
Yeah.
One Direction don't exist anymore, but they were just colossal for. I don't know, what do you think, 18 months maybe?
Yeah, something along those lines. Where they were the first big boy band on the scene, weren't they? You know.
Massive, yeah, massive.
Findlay, what's happened? What are we doing? What are we doing? We've drifted.
So anyway, let me get back onto the thing about wrestling. So he did a magazine on New Kids on the Block that did very well. So he was into fads, and wrestling's exploding in popularity in the UK in '91. And I suggested to him, Martin, why don't you do a magazine on pro wrestling? And he thought about it, sent me a fax. Said, right, you're doing it. And that was it.
Fantastic.
So it launched in January 92.
That was
Superstars of Wrestling.
Yeah, Superstars of Wrestling magazine. So Superstars of Wrestling magazine then. 30 issues, am I right? Was that right?
30 issues, that's
30
right. 30
issues, 1991 to 1994, I want to say.
It was January 92 to June of 94.
I got the 94 bit right. That's good. Then rebranded into Powerslam magazine, yeah?
Yes.
What was the reason for the rebrand? Did you just want a different name? Did you just what was this? What was the situation there?
Well, Superstars of Wrestling was a name. I didn't come up with that. This was published by, I was just writing it then. And if you've seen some of those early issues of Superstars of Wrestling, it should be very obvious to you that I'd never written anything before one of Superstars of Wrestling. I mean, I can't look at those issues. I cannot look at them. It was probably took me about 16 months before the magazine started to look, I would say, passable. Not respectable, passable. I mean, some of those early issues should just be burned. I feel like buying them all up. Just incinerate them.
I've got some. If you want to talk shop later on, I've got some.
I mean, anyway, let's just move on. So that was the original publisher. He was called Martin Higginson. He came up with the name. He published the magazine, and then he rang me up I think it was about February or March of '94. And were you watching wrestling then?
Yeah. I was watching. You mentioned the boom in 1991. It was like 1990. I think SummerSlam 90 was the first one I watched there and then, sort of thing. And then I obviously trailed backwards and increased my knowledge.
Yeah.
On the back catalogue.
Yeah. But by 94, as I'm sure you'll recall, 91 was super hot. 92 obviously was as well. The peak was SummerSlam 92 at Wembley. I mean, they were never going to top that. I mean, they were still doing well, I think, really into 93. But certainly by early 94, things were dropping off in the UK.
Yeah, definitely.
So the sales of Superstars of Wrestling were declining. Ironically, at a time when the magazine is actually starting to look okay, because just through trial and error and just on the job training, I'm learning the business. I'm learning how to string a sentence together. So the magazine's starting to look okay by 94. And he just rang me up and says, Finn, it's not working. And which it wasn't, fair enough. And so he sold the magazine to me and someone called Colin Bowman, who was my then business partner. He went on to do WCW magazine. He also was involved in wrestling big shots and did all sorts of things in wrestling. And he just said to me, Finlay, we can do this. And he's basically saved the day.
Excellent.
After that phone call, I was like distraught. What we're going to do?
Well, of course, yeah. That's like your life. It's like you've built up to this, and then it's like bang, have that, you're gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially.
Also, I should mention we had the wressling hotlines at the time, which
I'm coming to that as well. I was grounded because of that.
It's a
0839 007 816. I remember I was grounded.
It's a familiar story. Lots of people went through that, but I thank you for spit shining and polishing my jagged road to the top.
I was always on there, man, all the time. I'd even listen to it twice sometimes because there was no internet then. No internet at all, So maybe the military had it, but so not in our house. But there was no internet. There was this means of reaching wrestling, a behind the curtain look at wrestling via a hotline. So every Sunday afternoon, when my parents would go and visit their parents, I'd be there. Then it'd be like curtain twitching, looking through. Right, they're gone now. 0839 007 816. I think that was the number. Hang on.
I can't remember.
It was. Yeah, I'd be there. I remember one of the early ones. It was there. Started with Brian Pillman is dead. I was like, what? And it's where else am I going to hear this news? You know what I mean? I was like, what? I don't believe this. What's going on? But yeah, there was so much on it. Plus, it was, you know, you were telling us about Japanese wrestling, which we could only then read through the magazine, but you were giving us news on that. So I sort of had a little following through that as well, and the tape trading pages at the back and everything, the letters and everything. So I managed to get some Japanese tapes. So it all tied together. But yeah, those hotlines. You might want to apologize to Sharon and Gerald Griffiths, okay, who are listening somewhere now, or will be later on, for the £306 phone bill that they had. It wasn't just you; it was the WWF hotline as well. But you know, you played a part. But I loved it.
Well, I mean, thanks to them, I'm planning on retiring next year. So, thanks very much.
Mom, Dad, you heard it here first.
So we'd started doing those in 90, I think it was late 92, and they were doing well. The magazine wasn't really doing very well. Wasn't really making much money out of the magazine. So we had, you know, a vested interest in keeping the magazine going. So he said, listen, Findlay, we can do this. So we did. And, you know, partly to keep the magazine going, partly to keep the hotlines going, which were doing well. And we wanted to retain the Superstars of Wrestling name, but we were basically told, because we had no budget for a big relaunch, that it was going to be far easier to change the name.
Yeah.
So by changing the name, you have effectively got a brand new title, brand new magazine. And that way the trade would look at it more favorably and carry more copies. So there's other reasons as well. People find them quite dull, I'm sure. So there was a reason for it, but we absolutely wanted to keep the Superstars of Wrestling name. But in hindsight, I'm glad we changed it, because, you know, Powerslam is fewer words, it's shorter, it was easier to do the logo, and it was just the right thing to do. So yeah, that launched in July of 94 with Owen Hart on the cover.
I was going to ask you who was on the cover, because I've got issue 1. I know who's on the cover, but there's no cover. It's gone. It was Owen Hart, I believe, King of the Ring winner, yeah. And if you look through this, I don't know what I've been cutting out here as a kid and everything, but
oh my God,
it's in pieces. This is, you know, there's bits all over the place, you know, but there's Japanese stuff cut out here, Jushin Liger cut out here. Yeah, it was great. I was going to quiz you on if you actually remembered who was on issue 1, but yeah,
Owen Hart, yeah, that's right. It was. I wasn't really happy. I wasn't really happy with the cover, to be honest with you, but at that point in time, it was very difficult to get photos. We were working on a pretty tight budget, and everything was just, you know, it's like the guy with the sticks and the plates, you know, it's just spinning. I was working long hours, working far too many hours back then, just to try and make this thing a success. You know, and the first issue did do well, and issue 2 did well also. We had an interview with Hulk Hogan in there.
Yeah.
And he was on the front cover. Wasn't such an amazing interview, if I'm honest.
An interview with Hulk Hogan nonetheless, though, man.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, they're few and far between.
Absolutely. And it was a good cover photo. Colin took the photo. But I mean, issue 3, Undertaker was on the front. Sales really dropped off. Issue 4, that did very poorly. Was actually, I think, the worst seller ever, actually. And,
really?
Yeah, issue 4. A lousy cover photo of, I think it was Rick Steiner and Road Warrior Hawk. So, I mean, that was a big part of it. The cover looked it was a really not even mediocre photo. And there was a lot of concern really in late 94 is this magazine going to make it or not? And it stabilized a bit with issue 5. Issue 6 was the first PS50 with Bret Hart on the front. That did pretty well. And then into 95, yeah, it was, you know, it was spotty, it was checkered. It was, some months were better than others, but there was some really tough times in the mid 90s there. And that was partly because the wrestling business, as I'm sure you recall, was going through some tough times.
Yeah, totally. That was like the Mabel era, wasn't it? And everything, you know, this, it wasn't great. It wasn't great to watch then, you know, it was a tough time. I think it was just after the steroid scandals and everything then as well. It took a dive, basically, the wrestling industry. So I can see what you're saying with the industry taking a dive. Who's going to want to read about, well, potentially at that time was a dying industry anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, happily Sky maintained its coverage. I mean, I think it was quite telling that, as you'll recall, in May 95, WWF started the In-Your Houses.
That's right, yeah.
But they didn't show them. They didn't start showing the In-Your Houses, I think, until, was it 96? I think it was right at the end of 96 before they started showing the In-Your House.
Yeah, it was around there, yeah. Cold Day in Hell, that sort of thing, I think, when
Yeah, it was late. I think it was late '96 when they started showing the In Your House events. But you go back and look at where WWF was in terms of priorities with Sky, because you roll it back to like 91, 92, they were doing the live TV specials in prime time. Remember the Battle Royal at Royal Albert Hall?
That's right, yeah.
And then they would do, was it the UK Rampage would be an annual event in, I think it was in April, and they would be live on Sky. And, you know, we get to the In Your House events and, you know, they can't manage to cut a deal with WWF to show them. So it was a worrying time to be covering wrestling, because you were sort of on edge all the time about Sky potentially dropping it because it was not the priority it once been. You could see that the business was not doing as well as it once was. And it was really hard to see a way out of it, because you're always looking for that next big star. And you go back and look at 95 and you think, right, Shawn Michaels, you know, Diesel's there. Diesel's doing pretty well, but he's not going to be that guy.
No. He was never going to be that guy, was he? You know?
No, he's not going to change things. He's not going to bring this new audience in. Shawn Michaels had been there a long time. Obviously, in 95, they're preparing him for his first world title victory at WrestleMania 12 in 96. But even Shawn as champ, you know, is not really going to make a difference. So it was a concerning time, certainly 95. You're thinking, you know, how much longer has this magazine got? Happily, I had no other options in life, so I kept on doing the magazine.
Persistence is key, man, you know?
But when you've got no other job options, then you stick with the one that you've got, don't you?
That's it, you know, the devil you know, so to speak. So what and when changed then? Obviously, so, you know, that was a rough spot then, shall we say. When did it change? How did it change? Was it just when Austin came on the scene sort of deal, was it? Or that era, the Attitude Era? Or
Austin was a difference maker. Certainly the NWO in WCW. It felt like WCW had something special there, and obviously they did.
I felt that as well, yeah, definitely. Not just with the NWO, but generally, I think it's because it was harder to watch it over here unless you had like TNT, I think it was, or whatever.
We didn't get Nitro until 96.
Yeah, that's right.
March 96 on TNT. But that was another very encouraging sign that the TV industry saw value in pro wrestling.
Definitely.
And it added, you know, the WCW's then flagship show to its weekly schedule. I think it was an edited version at first. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was just a 1 hour version at first, wasn't it? 96?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So that was encouraging. But I mean, still the magazine didn't really kick into life until probably late 97 was when things changed. And in fact, in late 96, I thought it was going to fold.
Did you, yeah?
Yeah, I did do. I mean, this was Austin obviously had the King of the Ring thing. But he didn't really, if you go back and look at the numbers that Survivor Series 96 did on pay-per-view, and that's with Bret Hart's return after taking, well, he was off TV for what was it, about 7 months off TV. I know he'd done some wrestling on house shows for WWF in the interim, but he'd been gone for about 7 months. And Survivor Series didn't do that well on pay-per-view. And that was obviously with the Austin Hart match, and I think we also had Michaels versus Sid, which were like two of the biggest matches that WWF could have presented at that point in time. So that was a bit concerning. But yeah, I thought the magazine was going to go under in late 96. And I guess it was probably mid 97 when things really started improving. And for Powerslam, I always say the turning point was issue 40.
40, yeah.
Issue 40, which...
Life begins.
Yeah. Which sadly was, you mentioned Brian Pillman earlier, and that was the Brian Pillman obituary issue.
Right, okay.
He was on the front cover of that. But that was when we did the first supplement. So I did a proper promotion. Everything was improving. There was money to spend on the magazine. So we did a proper promotion there, put a lot more copies out in the shops. And it ended up being a success. We ended up picking up, I think, a few thousand. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it was about 2,000 new readers.
Fantastic.
And most of them came back for issue 41, which, had the unexpected bonus of being the double cross issue.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff.
So people were fascinated by that. We had a picture of Bret Hart on the cover with the words "I quit." So I covered that.
I remember that cover. No, you've said it. Yeah, I remember that cover.
So, and I remember the Hotlines. That was our record month on Hotlines.
Was it? Yeah.
November '97. So, yeah, we did pretty well that month on the Hotlines.
Fantastic stuff.
So, but I mean, at that point, WCW is doing really well. We've got all this, we've got the Monday Night War going on, and that's in full effect. It's getting really nasty. Obviously, we'd had the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels feud that year, which was actually going on behind the scenes as well, as I'm sure you remember.
Absolutely.
And people were fascinated by the revelations there and the developments, and the whole business just felt like it had legs again, like it had some oomph,
a new lease of life.
Yeah, it had it'd been like toothless. If you go back to '95, it's like they were floundering, trying to work out which way to go. I mean, meanwhile, ECW creatively is on fire. '94 to '96 is ECW creative.
Well, I think it was something new, wasn't it? ECW then, for wrestling fans like myself, at least, it was like, oh, right, this is new. Let's have a little look at this. Let's. Someone's making a bit of a bang over here. What's that noise? Your attention's attracted to it. I think Eric Bischoff said that before, didn't he, when he was describing the Monday Night Wars? It's like, bang, we make a load of noise over here. People are looking. People stop to look, and that's what it was for ECW for me, definitely, because it was something we hadn't seen. It was, I think, hardcore as well, before hardcore was trash, if you will,
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the problem, of course, was it wasn't on TV over here. So you cover it in the magazine. It was a very niche thing. So, I mean, we cover it every month, as I'm sure you recall.
I do indeed.
It wasn't really going to sell magazines, and Powerslam wasn't on sale in the States. It was briefly on sale in the States in 2000. But the problem was you couldn't fly it over there.
Yeah.
Right, because it was just cost prohibitive. You couldn't make money out of it. So I had to go on a boat. So by the time it got to America, all the information's woefully out of date.
Yesterday's news.
Exactly. And like the cover price was we had no control over that for reasons I to this day still can't explain.
Yeah.
And it was like really quite expensive for what it was, I felt. I thought it was overpriced. Your news is out of date, and there was really not much point trying it. It wasn't.
What was the cover price over there, Finn, if you don't mind me asking?
I can't remember.
It was more than over here, though. Yeah, I think it was like what was it? It was $195 or something over here, was it?
Yeah. I can't remember what it was on sale for. It was. I mean, we gave it a try. We looked into it a lot. I mean, we actually did when Powerslam was at its peak. It actually did quite well in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm not, and that kind of seems to contradict what I just said about America. Yeah. But for some reason, it did well there. And I'm not sure why, because one imagines it would take even longer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In America. So.
perhaps they were using it for history lessons or something over there,
Well, mate, you could have something there. Maybe that is it. Yeah, maybe that.
But there are a lot of Brits over in Australia as well. So perhaps it was just like, oh, let's have a little look at this British magazine. Brilliant stuff. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. It's written properly.
Yeah, I think it was probably because there was fewer magazines in the shops.
Yeah, it could well be that as well.
So it's like, right, what we're going to, oh God, we'll have to buy Powerslam again.
Yeah.
It's the only one. That was probably it.
Well, I'll be honest with you, right? There were a few different magazines in the shops over here, all right? Yeah. And Powerslam was always my go-to, main reason being because it was a welcomed alternative, non-kayfabe alternative, might I add, to the WWF or the WWE magazine. It was all still through WWE magazine. It's all still in character. And when you get to a certain age then of like, I don't know, what would I have been then, 16, 17, it's a bit like, okay, it's almost like insulted intelligence to keep feeding yourself this. So at least with Powerslam magazine then, you still had all of that, everything you needed, but it wasn't insulting your intelligence, so to speak. It was like a behind the curtain sort of look into it as well,
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Powerslam, with wrestling, we kind of came out of the closet in '99.
Yeah.
It was the Chris Jericho interview in issue 61, where we just came out and said it. But prior to that, I like to think that you didn't really insult people's intelligence, and most people knew that it wasn't a real sport. So you would write about it in a way that they would be aware that you weren't trying to say, oh, it's all real. And
yeah,
no, I can't believe he beat him. I thought he was going to beat him. Or if you were going to write that, you would write in a way where you'd say, well, it seemed like the wrong result, that person going over there. Because had the other person gone over, he or she would have become a bigger star as a result, and just that type of thing. So there was ways of phrasing it.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was like, hey, look at us, we're exposing the business. That's not what I'm saying for a second, right? But yeah, the way it was written wasn't written in a way like, oh, so-and-so beat so-and-so by doing this, that, the other. Look at that. What's he going to do next? And all that, It was...
I remember years later, someone saying, well, because I always say, well, back in the early days, it was, we didn't really expose the business at all. And someone pointed out to me and said, well, hold on a minute, Findlay. You included The Undertaker's real name, Superstars of Wrestling, and that you'd previously been Mean Mark Callis in WCW and Master of Pain and Texas Red in USWA or World Class or wherever it was. So you've actually exposed the business there by pointing out that this guy isn't really a supernatural being. And that never really occurred to me until much later. And I thought, well, it's actually a fair point there.
Yeah, so yes and no, a fair point, but come on. All right, we all suspended our disbelief in Survivor Series 1990, where he comes out as this supernatural being. Did we really believe that he was really and truly in our hearts of hearts? I did.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So issue 61, that we did an interview with Chris Jericho. It was just before he signed with WWF. It was about 1 week before. And it was, really critical of WCW, that interview. It was obvious that he was going to WWF, but he wouldn't reveal that at the time.
Yeah, you wouldn't let the cat out of the bag, but all the hints were there.
Yeah, all the hints were there. And that was the first one in which we really just came out and said it. So that was the turning point, summer 99.
Perfect. Good stuff. Excellent. Your information in the magazine then. So you had lots of new bits and pieces for the wrestling fan as well. Like, that's the first time I ever read about ECW was in your magazine. Coverage on New Japan. I think it was, what was the other Japanese promotion? Was it Wing? It was called back in the day. I think your coverage on that, FMW. Atsushi Onita, all these names and everything. And that to me triggered me then to go to my little tape traders, who I also found in the back of Powerslam magazine, might I add. Lots of them. There was a little community going on behind the scenes. We'd all swap tapes. And then I was clued up on Japanese wrestling. So brilliant stuff. But where were you getting this information back then, Because obviously this was pre-internet.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you would be speaking to people. There was various ways of getting information back then. There was lots of underground sources of information. You would get the tapes from people, so you'd see the matches. You'd have like a network of photographers who would be able to supply you with the photos.
Awesome.
They would then know people who would know people, and they'd put you onto people, and then you'd get information that way. So there was lots of different ways of getting it. One thing I should actually mention to you was we were online, I think, about 1993 on CompuServe. So there was already
so there was a little I see. Okay.
I mean, I can't remember. Someone out there will know when the internet started. It started like so many years before people think it did.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, like I said earlier, I think it was a military thing, wasn't it? And then it was kept behind closed doors for X amount of years. And then it was like, public, treat yourself, have this.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, when we're doing the hotline, there'll be stuff, you just get it, there'll be so much stuff online in these message boards. I think really, maybe even 92, actually.
Really? That early?
Yeah. That's
really?
Right. There wasn't many people on it.
Yeah.
But the people who were on it, I'm not saying they knew everything, but there was a lot of information there.
Right, okay.
And
92, that surprises me that there was World Wide Web in 92. That really surprises me.
But, you know, there was lots of people, you know, lots of information sharing going on. And, you know, I was, you know, buying a lot of different, you know, you would get it from a lot of different sources.
Yeah, fair play. Fair play. It was great though. Anyway, it was fantastic. It was just like, right, take a look at this. This is brand new for you, you know, and that's something for me, Finn, anyway, which drew me into Powerslam magazine. It was like, right, this is different to all the other magazines out there, you know, and totally different. And it's also a UK magazine as well. You had Pro Wrestling Illustrated as well, which I also used to read, not as frequently. But Powerslam, and I'm not just saying it to kiss up. I don't do that, okay? I'm not that guy. But Powerslam to me just seemed to tick all the boxes for my wrestling fan stroke wrestler reading needs. And thank you to Powerslam as well. The pages at the back again. I saw an advert in there one day for NWA UK Hammerlock Summer Camp. I attended and I became a wrestler through that then as well. And I ended up wrestling for something like 12 years, running my own wrestling company, Celtic Wrestling, and which you also plugged in the magazine. So thank you for that a couple of times when we had some shows in the latter years, like 2008, 2009. So basically, so I've gone off topic a little bit now, but it ticked all the boxes. And
but you know, from being in the business and being around people, everyone talks.
Oh yeah, totally.
People know what's going on. You know, like there was lots of underground newsletters back in those days, you know, and you would subscribe to a lot of them, or people you know would. And like, I remember, you know, Dave Shearer from PW Insider, he did one called the Wrestling Lariat.
That's right. I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, which really specialized in ECW and you know, just stuff like that. So you get that occasionally. And but you would have people at the shows and they would then tell you exactly what happened. And you know, like for instance, on what we do on the Wrestling Hotline is we do the WWF and WCW pay-per-view reports the next day because WCW pay-per-views weren't on in the UK.
No, not at all. No.
I think DSF in Germany did show them weeks later.
Yeah, and then you had to just it was hard to watch. That was, you know, because you've got the German commentary. No, nothing against it if you can understand what the hell they're saying, but I don't speak German. You know, you're just watching Vader batter Sting, and it's just like, you don't know what's going on. Really, I don't know, just weird.
Yeah, and same with WWF. Sometimes the pay-per-views would be showed like screened 4 or 5 days later, even a week later, which seems, you know, hard to fathom these days, but that's the way it was.
It was, yeah. Sky Movies at the time, I think, as well, was showing them, wasn't it? Sky Movies, then later Sky Sports.
Exactly. So what you do is you'd speak to someone whose opinion you trusted, and they would actually go through it with you. So, because I mean, back in those days, there's obviously no broadband.
No, that's it.
You couldn't watch the event. You know, in '96, you just couldn't watch it. So how could you? You had to wait until you could get the video. I would actually have videotapes FedEx to me.
Yeah.
CW events. So I would watch the events before I wrote them up in the magazine. But obviously, less than 24 hours after the pay-per-view took place, there's no way you could watch the show in time to do that hotline.
No.
So, you know, you would speak to someone whose opinion you trusted, and then you would use that information to create your, you know, hotline report. So that would be the way it would be done. So, but there was lots of different things. And, you know, so many, I mean, the thing is, back in the day, I used to speak to so many people on the phone, and your phone bills each quarter would be like 650, 700
shite.
in the mid-90s, because you were speaking to people all the time.
Yeah.
But how else were you going to find the information? A lot of people were online then, but not everyone was. Yeah. So if you needed to find something out, you made that phone call.
No, fair play. Yeah, that's long before the days of like WhatsApp and well, even probably before the days of text messaging and everything. You know?
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you know, back then you'd have like the old school phone, and you weren't going to be able to send a 1,000-word text message, were you? It would have like a word limit, wouldn't it, on those?
Oh, yeah. I dare say, but no, brilliant. So what have we got here? So you had the letter section, want sales pen pals. As mentioned, I got into tape trading through this, got a massive look at like the Japanese wrestling. It was like Pandora's box had been open for me. It was fantastic. So cheers again for throwing us in that direction. I look back at some back issues now as well, and I see my name pop up in the letters page, and I cringe. There's one on there I was looking at the other day after you agreed to come on. It was titled "The Big Snub." It was when Chris Jericho was on the Big Breakfast, and Johnny Vaughan and Denise Van Outen were just making a bit of a mockery of him. So I wrote in and said about how he should have put Johnny Vaughan in the walls of Jericho and whatever. And I was just like reading it the other day, and I was like, oh no, I was a kid, man. And there's another one in there then. There were a few letters in there, mainly slagging off WCW for introducing a pay-per-view by way of Halloween Havoc coming to the UK. Then we get there and it's just a house show. There were a lot of people bitching and moaning about that. Then I put my letter in thanking WCW for a night I'll never forget, you know? So it's like, oh God, I look like a tit.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing is, I always say that if you're willing to volunteer an opinion, you've got to be willing to accept that you might be wrong at a later date.
Absolutely.
And you know,
yeah,
that's it.
when you're clued up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, humble pie doesn't taste great, but occasionally we've got to eat it. And I've eaten a fair share of humble pie over the years.
Oh, you and me both, mate, yeah.
But that's it. And the thing is, a lot of people out there who aren't willing to sort of put their heads on the chopping block, so to speak, and state what they think, and then afterwards will say, well, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. It's like, well, really? Did you? No, you did. You were saying the opposite thing. And certainly on social media, I think that's just exploded now, hasn't it? Like, you know, Captain Hindsight type moments, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, if I could go back on some of the things I put out there when Facebook first became a thing and all that, you know, it's like, yeah, what the hell, you know? Half of it is it's like, right, who cares if I've just had a sandwich? Do you know what I mean? It was just like, well, just had a sandwich. Actually, it was before it was on the phone. It was just had a sandwich. It's like, right, okay, yeah.
I've only got one like. I can't believe it. And no one's interested in what was in the sandwich.
No one's commented or asked a single question. What's going on?
Yeah. Quite why we feel the need to document every mundane detail of our lives on social media is beyond me. Mind you, I did notify people that I had my second vaccination last week. I thought that was quite exciting.
Yeah.
Someone actually did point out underneath, why are you sharing this with us, Findlay? Do we care? Which, you know, I thought was a valid point, actually. So,
well, I'll be doing the same later on today, my friend. Anyway, I'll be telling everyone, mainly just to let everyone know that I am a sheep. Meh, I am in Wales, yeah, just to stir it up for the people who like to express their opinion on everything more than anything, you know.
Yeah. Oh, can I just ask you about, you mentioned the Halloween Havoc thing. Was that the 93 tour they did?
Yes, it was. Yeah. They did one in Cardiff. It was the one in Cardiff, actually. An interesting incident happened in the hotel afterwards between Sid and Anne.
That was up in Blackburn, that was. And I think was Sid on the show?
Yes, he was. He was teaming with Rick Rude, I believe, against Sting and Dustin.
Okay. So, because I remember we went, actually, me and this guy called Mark Greaves, who was the person who...
Yeah, you mentioned him earlier on, yeah.
Strike Force Demolition match. We went to the show in Blackburn, which was the night after the incident.
Yeah.
The Moathouse Hotel between Sid and Anne and their big fights. Obviously, neither of those two were on the show. And it was such a subdued evening. And this Mark Greaves was so appalled by the caliber of the show that they put on. That was basically it for him and pro wrestling.
Really?
Yeah, it was. He'd been a fan for like years prior to that.
Jeez. And then he hung up the tights, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who Ric Flair was on with, but it was a pretty woeful performance by Ric Flair under normal circumstances. And I was trying to explain to him, listen, you can't, you know, Ric's best friend's just been in you know, him and Anne were best pals at the time. I said, he's just been attacked with a pair of scissors. They're all traumatized by this experience. You've got to cut them some slack.
That's it. You know, it's hard sometimes as a fan to, make the divide then, innit? By, all right, so, you know, what's real, what's not.
I learned a valuable lesson actually that night, because I understood why it was a subpar show, but he was a fan. He paid his money. He traveled all the way to Blackburn. He built up his hopes to watch this show and was, he'd been wanting to see WCW for years. I don't think he'd seen them on the Raw Power Tour back in '93 when they came over. And that, did you see any of those shows? The '93?
No. I don't believe I did then.
The March '93 tour. That was the really good one.
Yeah. Right. So no, I think, was it 93 or 92, did you say?
It was the March '93 one with Davey Boy Smith on, and they did really well. They did actually their best run of box office grosses in company history at that point. And they came over, and that was the show in which Sting regained the WCW World Title from Vader, Big Van Vader.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then he dropped it back in Dublin. And I saw them in Birmingham and Manchester, and the shows were tremendous.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Crowd. They weren't packed houses every night, but they drew tremendous crowds. And the people were so into it. And it did feel like a shift was taking place. Like maybe WCW was attracted a new audience.
Yeah. I think they definitely did. Well, obviously they definitely did eventually. But you felt it back then, yeah?
But I mean, then they came back in October for the Halloween Havoc tour. And it was, and I don't know, the TV situation in this country at the time for WCW was woeful. I think they just had Worldwide on, which was...
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was like, it started off on a Saturday, well, like 2:00 Sunday morning, first of all, I think it was. And then they had midday, Sunday afternoon, 2:00 Sunday afternoon, something like that. It was just random.
It was a weekend afternoon. I think it could have been Saturday afternoons, but it was kind of the middle of the afternoon, and it was Worldwide, which was mostly squash matches.
Yeah.
And then it could never work out why they didn't put Saturday Night on, which was their number one show pre-Metro, and they didn't. So, I mean, that momentum that they'd really built from the March tour, which was so well received, people were just buzzing about it. They just threw it away, really.
Yeah, literally piddled all over it.
Yeah, I mean, they should have been over here trying to strike a TV deal on the back of, all the support they got on that tour. And the fact that Davey Boy Smith was there, they were all over the newspapers and everything. It just felt like WCW was a huge force in the UK for the first time. And by the time October came, it kind of diminished, really.
Fizzled out.
But yeah, the Blackburn show, it was... Yeah, I was trying to explain to this guy, well, you've got to cut him some slack. I mean, I know I was serious, and I do feel like he should have done. It's like, look at what all these guys had just been through last night, and they were traumatized by it. It was an awful incident in the company's history. But he was like, well, hold on a minute. No, I paid my money, and I want a show. And that's the way some people think about it. And you've got to be broad-minded about these things, and you just say, well, that's the way, this is the way it is because that's what I think. It's like, well, no, this is what other people think. And maybe you should consider that and add that to your way of thinking as to why people are not choosing to support this company anymore. So, that's the way it is. A lot of people just want the show, don't they? They want
well, that's it. Yeah. It's like for a lot of people, it's like, Broadway. This is it. This is what's happening. I don't care what's going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Show me this, show me this.
That's it. I paid my money. Am I getting a discount because you're having a bad day? No, I'm not, am I? I'm paying a full price ticket for this show. So I want a full price quality show. And that's the way, a lot of members of the public think. And, that's the way it is. And if you are in the business of presenting shows, you've got to cater to that audience.
I'm with you. Going back to the magazine then. So where were we in terms of the magazine? So 1994, I've already mentioned this. Yeah, the £300 phone bill my parents did. I was grounded because of the hotline. I was going to ask you about the hotline information. I think we've already covered that. The information you were getting, you were on the phone to everybody. So in terms of the magazine, you had lots of different articles in there. One I came across, I used to enjoy reading, Stately Wayne Manor. Yeah.
Yes.
Who was he? Was he a real person? What's the deal with Stately Wayne Manor?
Yeah, definitely a real.
Who was behind the pen? And is the name down to the Sopranos? Yeah.
Well, it was Batman's house, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. That's what
So,
it is.
you know, I discovered him through a magazine called Wrestling World, which was an American wrestling magazine, which may have been on sale in some parts of the UK. If it was, I never saw it. So I came into contact with Wrestling World, must have been through a photographer I was dealing with at the time. And yeah, I think that's right. And this guy who ran the magazine, who was called Steve Cicerelli, I think he was called. I think I remember calling him and saying, "Oh, do you have these photos?" That's right. Yeah, it was John Barrett and Russell Turiak. They were supplying photos to that magazine and supplying photos to Superstars of Wrestling. So we were kind of brought together there. And I remember speaking to the boss at Wrestling World magazine, and he had certain photos, which I think I needed, and he sent them over. And he was another person that you would speak to, and he knew a lot of stuff that was going on. He'd been around wrestling for a long time. And he sent me over a copy of Wrestling World, and Stately Wayne Manor, whose real name was Ernie Santilli, he wrote for that magazine. And I was amused by his comedy column, like his heel. I liked it. And I remember like Wrestling's Main Event. Do you remember Wrestling's Main Event?
What's that magazine?
Yeah, there was I can't remember the name of the guy, but he had like a heel columnist. There was obviously in the PWI, was it Eddie Elner? I think was
right.
Yeah,
sounds about right. Yeah.
But in that period of time, it was customary for a magazine to have a heel columnist who would write from the standpoint of backing the villains.
That's it. Yeah.
Faces. So I said, do you want to do something for Superstars of Wrestling? I mean, the guy was obviously a professional writer. He was, 100 times the writer I was back then. And he said, yeah. And we came to a price, and he started providing a monthly column. So, yeah, that was it. He was
brilliant
with the magazine.
Stuff. No, brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Like you say, it was like a spokesperson for the heels sort of thing, To me,
again, he was a different slant on things, and some people didn't like it. A lot of people didn't like it. And eventually, I asked him, listen, well, I didn't ask him, I told him, I said, listen, we're going to have to drop Stately. I think this was late 2000s. I can't exactly remember the year when the change occurred. And I said, you're going to have to start writing under your real name, because it just feels like that time has passed.
Yeah, it happens. It happens to many things, especially if it's sort of a gimmicky thing, they have a shelf life, don't they, So it's always the case in wrestling.
Definitely. But once, the kayfabe thing was over, and, we were long past that by the 2000s. And I just said to him, I'd like you to start writing under your real name and having more of a serious tone, which is what happened. He wasn't too happy about it at first, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
But, he went along with it. And I thought he brought something different to the magazine. And I thought what he did as the Ernie Santilli himself was more in keeping with the magazine at the time.
Yeah.
Stately Wayne Manor would not have worked.
Okay, I get you. Yeah.
So, yeah, there were a few moments there where we had a bit of a falling out, but we sorted out in the end.
People fall out.
Yeah, these things happen,
Listen, it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. When you're the boss and you're making decisions, sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't going to be popular with the people who work for you.
Well, this is it, if you please everyone, it's not going to work always, is it,
Yeah, absolutely.
If you just do things to please everyone rather than make things work right, it's business at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he was with the magazine from '93 until the end, he's a good guy. I met him a few times, and he was very reliable, and he's somebody that got a lot of respect for.
Fair play, excellent stuff. Well, I enjoyed his columns anyway. As I enjoyed pretty much, I would genuinely read from cover to cover, and I'd order the magazine with my newsagent in later years then as well. Because I'd moved from my one town, and then I went to another, couldn't find it anywhere, and then I moved to another, and it was like, oh, there it is, Powerslam, brilliant, I'll take that, thank you. Can I order this? So I'd order it every month then as well. It'd be there. I'd pop down. I would never know when it was coming. I'd pop down, and she'd be like, "It's not here yet." I'm like, "Okay, ta-da." Not your yet. Oh, okay, ta-ra. It's your yes, you know. So it was great. I would read it from cover to cover. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Always, I was there from the start, pretty much to the end. You know, I got out of wrestling myself in about 2010-ish.
Okay.
I wrapped up Celtic wrestling. I stopped wrestling myself. I do pop back every now and then, as you probably hear a lot. It's like the mafia. Once you're in, you're in. It's hard to get out, you know. And I was making a comeback just before lockdown, but that's another story. But talking of the end of the magazine then, so where, why, how did you decide, right, enough's enough? It's not working anymore. Was it because of the internet? Was it because of like there was a bit of a recession going on again? What was the situation there?
Well, I mean, certainly after the crash of September 08, I think it was. That was when our sales started to decline.
That was when there was a clear difference, was there, in the sales?
Definitely was. We did manage to turn it around. In 2009, things were going pretty well. Up until 2010, the magazine was still doing all right as well. But it was just, I think, a lot of factors. I think just the rise of the internet and the proliferation of news sites. Lots of people didn't want to pay for words anymore. And, you know, lots of people today don't want to pay for words either. Which obviously for people who create words is problematic.
Absolutely, to say the least.
So I mean, there's definitely shifting attitudes in terms of how people consume their content, that being that they expected it for free.
Yeah, that's like it's, and I think in the magazine industry as a whole, we're talking here, not just Powerslam, obviously.
Absolutely, you know. Absolutely. I mean, you know, I've been a magazine person. I'm still in the magazine business now with Inside the Ropes magazine. I just contribute to that. And, but absolutely, after 2008, it was everyone's sales pretty much were in decline. Not everyone, but almost everyone were experiencing declines. And it was a really tough time. It was a really tough time and really quite demoralizing. Because you feel like, well, that issue should sell. That issue, we've done everything right in that issue. The cover's great. You know, the articles are strong. There's like an amazing interview in it or whatever. You know, I know I'm marking my own homework here, but it's like, you know, you've put out an issue that 5 years earlier.
Yeah, you've put your heart and soul into it. Yeah,
but basically, you know, you've got an issue 5 years earlier would have done really well. You just know, because everything that needed to be there, all the elements that were going to sell were included, were present and correct. And it was just the way things were. And, you know, you start to doubt yourself under situations like this. You think, am I losing it? Is the magazine not as good as it once was? So there's definitely a lot of that goes on as well. You know, you'll try new things, which might not be successful, but you know that you've got to change something. You've got to try something different because what you're doing is not working. So we tried different things. I mean, I don't think we really strayed too far from, you know, the vision of what Powerslam was, but we did try definitely different things in the 2010s. And I mean, it was just inevitable, really. Sales continued to decline. As my magazine distribution company would tell me repeatedly, Findlay, your sales decline is not as steep as other magazines. And it's like, well, that's not much of a consolation.
Yeah.
Your sales are still declining and it's still bringing in less money. And, you know, in 2010, I ended up cutting some costs, but didn't really cut them that much. Like, for instance, I was paying photographers at this point £35 per photo.
Wow.
Just before inside. Now, if it was a cover, they would get more, an inside front cover or centerfold. Now, also when a photographer went and did a gig, he or she would be paid expenses. So, you know, that was something I paid. And that's something that apparently some magazines, not talking about wrestling magazines, but some magazines apparently didn't do this. And I would think, well, how are the photographers making money out of this? And I think what they would have to do is try and sell the photos to lots of different titles.
Yeah, sell them elsewhere as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would do that. So the photo bill each month was colossal because we used a lot of photos. But that was one of the strengths of the magazine, was that, I think we only ever used the same photo twice, maybe 2 times in the entire history of the magazine.
That's good going. That's really good going.
And it was actually, one of those times was by accident.
Yeah.
Because it was like I'd used it years earlier. And I think I did it one other time. So it was always original photos, which to me was very important. And I thought I had the best photographers. I thought the standard of the photos,
the photos were phenomenal. They were fantastic. Goes without saying. Absolutely.
And all these people, this was your network of people who were, they weren't just your photographers. These were people who would, like, for instance, George Sahinas from ECW. He was the guy who was the middleman on lots of those interviews that I did. And other people would sort of interview them, doesn't matter what the names are, but other people that you knew through the magazine would sort out interviews with you.
Yeah.
And also, you were saying earlier about, your info and stuff. Well, you'd keep in touch with these guys. So you'd have your own network of people who you could contact about, was this, what's going on? Is this true? What can you tell me about this? All these type of things. And that would just develop over time. Actually, just one other thing as well, just another nod to Ernie Santilli. He was a guy who had been watching wrestling since the 70s, I think. He'd been like a huge fan of Superstar. Graham was his favorite wrestler.
Right. Oh, classic.
I used to go to the Spectrum and places like that, watch it live. He was from the Philadelphia area. And I learned so much about wrestling from him. Just want to give him some more pour some more compliment praise upon
Can never have too much of that.
Well, exactly. But he was somebody who knew so much more about business than I did in '93. And it would be fascinating talking to him about, why something happened or what might happen next or what he thought. And these were the sort of people you needed to speak to when you're 23, 24, and you only really know what you've learned from, PWI or whatever.
Yeah. You need to absorb.
Yeah, these magazines, which are all, kayfabe magazines, there's only certain elements of that content that's actually factual, as I would discover later. And plus, we all like the gossip as well.
Standard. Yeah, it's fantastic. We can't get enough. As much as we try to deny it and shy away, we all love a gossip, don't we? Come on.
So that would be the thing. All the people that you would meet through running the magazine or come into contact with. There was loads of people over the 22 and a half years that I did that magazine. So yeah, it just got to the point really where, 2011, 2012, it's still making money. Gets to 2013 and you can feel that it's coming to an end.
Yeah, you felt it in your water. Like.
Yeah. I'd done some cost cutting in 2010, cut the photo rate from £35 per photo to £27.50 per photo, which was still a really good rate. And believe me, photographers would be very happy if you were getting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't suppose it'd make a lot of difference to the photographer per photo, but to yourself, however much you're paying out and however many photographers over the course of a year, that's a mass saving,
Exactly. So I mean, there's some and a lot of other costs that I was able to cut that didn't actually affect the people who contributed to the magazine. There's lots of things you could do there, and I remember. In 2010, I actually, even though the magazine brought in less money, the profits actually, I managed to maintain the profit margin in 2010, the same one that I'd had in 2009. And that was just all from basically just streamlining the business. I would do a little bit more of the writing, just to really make it so that we were trimming unnecessary costs. But I had a choice at the end. I could have done a load more cost cutting. I didn't want to do that. I like to feel like at the end I was still paying everyone well. In fact, I know I was.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the greatest compliments that was ever paid to me was on the day when I rang everyone up after issue 237 was at the printers, and I'd made the announcement in that magazine that this was it. And I rang everyone up. I think it was a Sunday. Actually, I think there's one person that I didn't get to speak to. I had to ring him on the Monday. But this was still before the magazine went on sale on Thursday. And I was on the phone, I guess, for about 12 or 13 hours that day.
Oh, crikey.
Happily, phone prices had come down from the mid-90s.
Thank the good Lord.
you could, and thank competition.
Yeah.
We were seeing British Telecom back then, weren't we? So
That's right, the monopoly.
So by then, you could make long distance calls. Most people lived in America or Canada. You could make a long distance call. It really wasn't that expensive. I remember one of the guys saying to me, Findlay, have you ever thought about cutting our money? Because you pay us really well. Just, you could cut our money and keep it going. And
fair play to them. It's not everyone that come out with that,
Absolutely. A really good guy from Canada, a guy called Mike. He said that. And I was just like, well, I've made the decision. I mean, I could do this. I mean, I probably could have run it for another 6 months or so, maybe got another year out of it.
Yeah.
But the problem would have been that there would have been a declining quality of the magazine. We would have had to print on cheaper paper. If Powerslam was on really nice paper. There would have been, it would have had a detrimental effect on the quality of the title. And I just thought to myself, what is the point of doing this? What are you really going to get out of this financially? It's not really going to make you that much money. And people are going to have, people's memories of this magazine are going to be tarnished. It's going to be blighted by the way it went out.
Yeah. So go out on a high rather than,
mediocre.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of, people in the news trade, of course, didn't want me to close it because they were all making money from it. And, no one really wanted me to shut the magazine. And I didn't tell anyone until that day when I just rang everyone. So it was, I think some people knew it was coming. Obviously, they weren't happy about it, that it was going, but it was my decision. And I've got no regrets at all. And, it launched it in July 94. The final issue went out in July 2014. I thought 20 years, well, that's a nice.
That's awesome.
Well,
yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great run. So well done, basically.
Yeah,
honest to God, that's great.
To me, somebody used the phrase "the race to the bottom." Once you start cost cutting, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, well, that's it. You're
just trying to squeeze every last pound out of it. It's like, well, there isn't. Just close it now while it's
go
still
out on a high.
Yeah, well, it's while people will have fond memories of it. That was the thing. Almost a little bit like. Look at Bret Hart, how he wanted to go out at Survivor Series 97, and he didn't get to do that, as we know.
No. Don't we know it?
Yeah, because he couldn't write that story, but I had the power to write my own story, and that's the way.
That's the way. Good man. Excellent. Well, in closing, to sum it up in one word, your experience, your high of running Powerslam magazine, one word, what'll it be? Put you on the spot now.
One word. Well, you can't use the word interesting because that's boring, isn't it? It's just a boring word that doesn't really tell anyone anything, does it? I mean, it was a roller coaster ride.
Excellent. I'll go with that. Yeah, fantastic.
It certainly was. There's lots of ups and downs. I mean, overall, it was very invigorating, life changing, and I never thought I would ever do anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful at the fact that I had that experience and that people supported it, and I did well out of it, and lots of other people did as well. That would be something I'm most proud of. That, I made a few quid out of it. Powerslam did well for me, but a lot of other people, made some decent money out of it as well.
And I'd imagine some decent connections as well and contacts as well.
Absolutely. But I mean, that's up to them, and everyone. All those people made what they did out of it off their own backs, through their own ingenuity, their own hard work. I'm not taking any credit for that. Those people, contributed, and, the fact that once the magazine was doing well, sort of in the late 90s, didn't really start doing really well until about 2002. That was when it really started doing well. 2002 to about 2010 was its best run. But I mean, once the magazine was doing well, people say, trickle down economics doesn't work. Well, I disagree, because when I was running Powerslam, certainly people benefited from the success. People who work for Powerslam benefited from the success of that title. So that's something that I'm, really probably most proud of. So, but, to everyone who bought it over the years, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Brilliant. Well, Findlay, it's been an absolute pleasure. I thank you firstly for Powerslam magazine. Great read, loved it. I thank you for coming on and having a chat with me. I feel we could have chatted all day, all right, but I've got to run off and have a job.
Sure.
So thanks again for coming on. It's been a genuine pleasure. Good luck with everything. Good luck with your projects today, Inside the Ropes. Good luck with that. And thanks. Keep in touch, and I'll speak to you again down the line sometime, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have no ill effects from your second vaccination, and thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure, sir. You take care. See you soon. All the best. Findlay Martin, everybody. Woohoo!